Hello, this is Dr. Churchill again for Astronomy 308 into the Final Frontier. And today's lecture is going to be on the overview effect. Now, last time we met, we talked about the expansion of humans and the fact that they went from local nation states or whatever, city states, and then into empires and kingdoms, and then into global imperialistic, empires, if you will. And we basically have the modern day world, and we went through a period in the 1400s and the 1500s to learning that we live on this planet and learning of all the different areas on the planet. We basically discovered our home planet in that period. Since then, we've been building and filling all the niches and doing that sort of thing. And one of the things that's happened is that we had this breakthrough technology, if you will, right after or during World War II, in which rockets were built. And it was understood by these people that were building rockets that this was an outlet to get people into space. By World War II, people understood the physics of how to get an object to orbit around the Earth. And that came from Isaac Newton and his 3 laws of motion and his laws of gravity. The idea was, how do you get something to move fast enough that it can fall around the planet at the same rate that the curvature of the planet is moving away from it? That's really what an orbit it is. So the idea was when the rockets were being built was that this could be used as a tool to put something into orbit or put people into space and put people into orbit. Of course, that was a dream of many of the rocket builders, but the fact of the matter is rockets were being built as weapons of war. And so they were built as delivery systems for basically they had a payload at the top of the rocket, and they put a bomb in it and then fire the rocket, and it could go several hundred miles or things like this. And Werner von Braun from Germany was the first person to launch a rocket that went into space. That was in 1942. And he could send warheads several hundred miles away, and particularly they could strike London and things like that. After the war, it became more about delivering nuclear weapons halfway around the world. So this breakthrough technology was really used as a formidable and frightening weapon. I think I mentioned that earlier. And so the thing is that they wanted to take these rockets and take them out of the hands of a total crazy military nuclear arms race in space and make it a civilian race in a sense. So Kennedy gave a speech in May of 1961 in which he said, hey, let's put a human on the moon. And it really was about, let's beat the Russians at this game of space. And we'll find out that the Russians were the first into space. If you don't already know that, they had launched a satellite called Sputnik in October of 1957. And this really kind of freaked out the United States. We're going to talk more about this. This is really the origins of the space race. But here's what happened. We work like crazy to put humans in space. And at first, we put some astronauts in orbit around the Earth, and they barely could look out the window because these spacecraft had little tiny ports in them. And then we got into Project Apollo, and we flew one Apollo space mission in Earth orbit. And then the next one, we sent it out to the moon. And what happened there? You think, wow, this is a new era. We are going to a destination, the moon, which is 248,000 miles away from Earth. And we're going to be about the moon. We're going to think about the moon. And what happened was this was the first time humans had seen the Earth floating in space as a, a planet in an infinite black void, illuminated by its local star, which they could see the star. And then they could see the rest of the universe with great clarity. And they took movies of the Earth getting smaller and smaller, and they beamed those back to Houston, and it was put on TV. And then when they orbited the moon, they took a picture of the moon as it came over the horizon, and they called it Earthrise. And this really changed human perspective. And so what happened was, what the astronauts say is, we went to the moon, focused on the moon, and we discovered the Earth. And what we discovered about the Earth was that, in fact, it is this precious, small, little jewel, as Carl Sagan calls a pale blue dot in space. Now, you've grown up having seen all of these pictures from the first time you can remember seeing any pictures of space. And I don't think they have the impact for you that they had for the people that were adults at the time, or the people that were young like myself. I was 7 years old when Apollo 8 went to the moon, Apollo 11. And it really was a life-changing effect, a cognitive shift. And the astronauts would come back and talk about this as well. Fast forward, and then you get the spatial era, and people are going into space around and orbiting the Earth all the time. And by then, we're not going to the moon anymore. And they're looking out their window and they're seeing something like this slide that you see here. And they're able to really watch the Earth. And then the space shuttle program came to an end in 2011, but the International Space Station had existed, and people really were able to Earth watch, and they would come back changed. And they would see us as a single species on a single planet living together in a biosphere, and one in which we had to share with all of the plant life and all of the other animal life and the weather systems and all the things that make the Earth alive. And this affected a young man who's about my age. He was a young man when he was young, a gentleman by the name of Frank White. And he thought about this, and he called it the overview effect. And he has now started something called the Overview Institute, in which he tries to study this. And so that's what today's lecture is going to be about. It's going to be a fairly short one because I want you to watch the accompanying supplementary videos, one called the Overview Effect. And I can't remember the name of the other one because I don't have a very good memory. I'm going to look it up real quickly for you. Down to Earth, the astronaut's perspective. And so I want you to make sure when you watch these movies that you, as I said before, isolate yourself, don't have any interruptions, and really allow yourself to be sucked into the message and the feeling of what's happening here. And I'll at the end of these slides, I'll tell you why that feeling is important. Okay, so I'm going to move to the next slide here. So as I said, the astronauts spent a lot of time looking out at the Earth. And so here are some images that are in this port area, this a sort of a viewing area within the International Space Station with this huge round window. And when astronauts would have any downtime, this is exactly where they would go, and they would just Earth gaze and Earth watch. And when you watch the videos, you'll see how dynamic they feel the Earth was and how it affected them. And you can see that if you are outside of the space station doing work, and I'm thinking of this image down here in the bottom, the open expanse that you would feel and sense of the infinity of space in which the Earth is embedded would really strike you. And it transcends from being something that you and I know about intellectually to something that we feel, and it becomes a part of a reality for us. You know, we're down in the weeds, so to speak. We're not flying over the top of the forest or above the savanna. We can't see everything. We know it's there, but we're down amongst the weeds. And that's the thing with the astronauts. They were able to get out of the weeds, get off the Earth, and see it in its full environment. This is a picture of the Earth taken from orbit around the moon. This is not an Apollo image, but this one in the upper right is an image from a reconnaissance spacecraft that orbits around the moon, and it took this picture. And so this gives you a sense of what that looks like from the distance of the moon. So one of the things that you'll, these are some quotes, the quote in the upper left here by this astronaut, Sultan bin Salman. He says in the video that the first day that astronauts get up there, they point to all their countries, gee whiz, there's my country, you know. And then a couple days later, they're saying, well, there's the continent of Africa. And then by day 5, they just see the Earth. And so you see, you made a transfer mentally from this thing that's broken into parts and subdivided into something that's a single gaia, the planet Earth. Now, Yuri Gagarin was the Russian who was the first human being to ever orbit the Earth, and he did this in 1961 in May, or April 12th, actually, sorry. And here was a quote that, as the first person to return from the Earth orbit and see the Earth from that vantage point, he says, looking at the Earth from afar, you realize it's too small for conflict and just big enough for cooperation. It's kind of an interesting too small, too big kind of juxtaposition. But again, this sense of unity and the futility of projecting otherness on other peoples or other animals or plant life and things like this. This got codified as the overview effect by Frank White. Here's on the right-hand side a picture of Frank White's book, Space Exploration and Human Evolution. And he coined the term the overview effect. Now, Frank White is going to be our first visiting speaker, and he's coming, I believe, on the 9th of February. So that's going to be really quite a joy. And he's very articulate about this and very passionate about it. He's dedicated his life to it. So what is the overview effect in his words? So it's a cognitive shift of awareness. It's reported by most astronauts and cosmonauts that have experienced space flight. And it's the effect that results from viewing the Earth from orbit or from out at the moon. It's an experience of the firsthand reality of Earth in space. And it's a cognitive understanding that is immediately overtakes you, that this is tiny, it's fragile, it's a ball of life, it's in an immense void. It's basically, the fragility is this gossamer thin layer of the atmosphere. You know, if you could shrink the Earth down to the size of an onion or an apple, the atmosphere layer is actually thinner than the skin of the apple. It's a very small boundary, and yet it protects all of life on the Earth, okay? It also shields not only allows us to breathe so we can oxygenate our blood, but it also shields us from harsh radiation that's out there in space. So anyway, they say here, astronauts talk about how national boundaries vanish, how the conflicts that divide us seem absolutely unimportant to the overall scheme of this amazing system, the oneness of this system. And they really start thinking about our society in terms of a planetary or global society that should be united, and that we should be united just because we are all one and of the same. And they feel that this is such a powerful experience that it's obvious, and the importance of it becomes paramount. So the thing is you wonder, what if we could actually put our politicians, send them around the moon and have them do their negotiating while they're looking at the Earth out there in space? And I personally think that would be the best thing we could ever do. I mean, my personal opinion is that Vladimir Putin should be put on a spacecraft and sent to the moon, and then the rocket engine should break so that maybe he doesn't return. Okay, I didn't say that, and I don't want to get poisoned. So anyway, that would pretty much indicate that the idea that you can really maybe change the political systems of the world in order to bring unity to the world could happen if we could have politicians out in space. So you basically can see this last quote at the bottom. You develop an instant global consciousness, a people orientation, not an other people orientation, an intense dissatisfaction with the current state of the world, and maybe even a compulsion to do something about it. From out there in the moon, the international politics look really petty. So that's Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14. Now, Edgar Mitchell really experienced the overview effect, probably with some of the greatest profundity. He talks about that experience in the Overview Effect movie. But the bottom line was that he had taken astronomy, and he knew that the elements of our body had been forged in the cores of stars out there in the galaxy, and that the oxygen, nitrogen, and things like that that make us up and make up our planet used to be in the cores of stars. We were all manufactured in the same, factory, so to speak. Then we came together, the sun and the earth, and life developed, and we all have that same connection. So he not only saw us as being unified on our planet itself, but he also saw us unified within the greater universe. And that will lead us to the next level of the Frank White's idea, something called the Cosmo Hypothesis. So I'm going to back up on that Vladimir Putin, and I'm going to say that the spacecraft payload is Vladimir Putin. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. This is the webpage for the Overview Institute that Frank White has developed. I just thought I would take a snapshot of it. You can easily go check it out for yourself. Anyway, it's an institute that's designed to get great minds together to think about this dialogue, to record and disseminate the experiences of the astronauts in order to get the idea of the oneness of humanity out there to change social consciousness. And if the overview effect could be something we all experience, and it would change social consciousness collectively, then maybe we could truly make progress towards more world peace. So Frank, thinking about this more with time, wrote a second book called The Cosmo Hypothesis. And it's not really in the movie, but I want to talk about it because he'll probably talk about it in his guest lecture. And this is a much broader and a far more far-reaching meta theory of humanity. This statement here sounds quite technical, and then I'll explain what it means. But it says, you know, the universe is a living information system composed of interconnected information systems serving as subsystems to the whole. So you have these small information systems that are connected to make a large information system that's interconnected. At each level, there is an order and organizational pattern that's different, and yet it is common, sort of like a fraction, fractal. Pardon me with my inability to come up with words sometimes. Is like a fractal system where the shapes and the designs are the same, but as you increase the level, you see the same shapes and designs. Okay, so this is something that he calls, you know, info systems. Well, you could think of life like us as an info system. Our mind is an info system. The shape of the entire universe is an info system. And in fact, I don't have a slide of it, but it turns out that the structure of your neurons connecting between your dendrites in your mind, and so the way your brain is wired, when you look at the way galaxies are distributed in the universe, they are distributed in the same pattern as the dendrites and neurons of your brain are distributed. And so this is kind of a freaky thing that something as large as the universe has a structure and interconnectivity from one side of the universe to the other that is the same pattern physically, topographically, as the neurons from one side of your brain to the other, getting that transmit information and electrical impulses. So this brings us to what the implications of this really mean, and what the next layer of the overview effect is in the terms of the Cosmo Hypothesis. So here's a couple premises about it. Some astronauts experience a new relationship with the universe and understanding that humans are part of an enormous whole system. That was the experience that Ed Mitchell had in Apollo 14 that I talked about, where he saw us as connected to the entire universe through the formation of stars, the fusion of chemical elements in the stars, the death of the stars, the formation of new planets and solar systems with the elements that were made in those previous generations of stars, and then incorporated into us, into me, into you, into your parents, into people that lived in 1000 BCE. We're all interconnected through this cosmos. Okay, we are alive. Next bullet. As part of the universe, humans are alive, and humans are self-aware and intelligent. Okay, there's a lot of variations on intelligence. Not all intelligence has complete and total self-awareness, but we do. Now, if we are a natural product of the physical processes that happen in this universe, then we are the universe as much as we as individuals are the universe, as much as a planet is part of the universe, as much as a star is part of the universe, as much as a galaxy is part of the universe, as much as the structure of galaxies is part of the universe. We are a part of the universe. Therefore, we are the universe, yet we are self-aware. So if we are the universe and we are self-aware, that means to that extent, next bullet, the universe is alive and self-aware and intelligence. We are the self-aware intelligence of the universe. We look up at the stars, we look at the blackness of space, and we ponder what it is. We are the universe itself, pondering what it is. This is the Cosmo Hypothesis. Okay, that means that last bullet, our evolution therefore is interrelated with the evolution of the universe. If we become extinct, then that mind of the universe becomes extinct. If we explore the galaxy, become nomads of the galaxy, then we provide more information to the universe to understand itself, okay? We are interlocked with the evolution of the universe and its self-awareness. So the last bullet, human evolution affects universal evolution by creating more life awareness and intelligence within the universe. It's a very meta hypothesis. And I don't know if you think about these things all the time or never think about these things. But the point is, in this class, which is a Viewing the Wider World class, we must stay oriented toward thinking about the meta-human condition, because what we want to do is we want to understand in this class where we're going to go, or better yet, we want to have wisdom so that we can choose where to go and do it in a positive sense and take the good with us and take the unity with us, okay? So that is my set of slides for today, apart from a final quote from Frank. Building on the overview theory, I would suggest that for an entity to have an awareness of itself, it must have an overview of itself. In other words, it must be able to see itself within its environment. That's called the meta view, okay? We know that the astronauts provided the perspective for humanity by going into orbit or the moon. So what Frank is saying is, even though that experience of the overview effect has happened only within a small subset of humans, it is transferred to all humans through them, in the same way that the knowledge experienced by all humans is transferred into the consciousness of the universe. More than that, continuing with Frank's quote, humanity has provided that perspective for the gaia of the earth and all living things on it. So Frank goes even further to say that that experience of the overview effect from astronauts has reached us, but by reaching us and being in the astronauts, it actually has been transferred to the entire energy of life on the planet itself. And this is a very, very interesting idea, and one that really tells us, it commands us to be at one with the universe and to be self-sustaining with the universe, rather than a population of species that sees itself as separate from the universe and sees the universe as something to then be exploited for our personal use. If we see ourselves separate from the universe, then we will exploit it for our personal use. If we see ourselves as the universe itself, then we will be more at one with it. Okay, enough deep philosophy or Cosmo Hypothesis for today. But I want you now to watch the overview effect. Again, please do so only in an uninterrupted environment and enjoy it very much. And then also watch Down to Earth after that. And you will have completed week 1 of the class, apart from taking the attendance quiz, which I gave you the attendance Easter egg, and also you'll have to then take the lecture quiz and do the homework. Okay, so I hope that you enjoyed today's lecture, and I hope you very much will enjoy the overview effect. It really will set the tone for understanding the meta perspective we need to have while we look back at human history and why we got where we are today and how we're going to move ourselves forward into the galaxy and into the future. Okay, so we'll see you next time. Thank you.